Penguin Random House Audio presents The Last Time I Saw Her by Karen Robards. Read for you by Anne-Marie Lee. Chapter 1. His eyes are the wrong color. That was the panicky thought that tore screaming through Charlie's mind. They should have been sky blue. They weren't. They were a hazelish shade of brown. She stared up at him unblinking and felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. It has to be him. Who else could it be? His eyes were the wrong color. He had a tiny white scar beside his mouth that had never been there before. His hair was cut short and was kind of styled, and his 6'3" frame looked leaner than it should have been. Maybe that was because the black leather motorcycle jacket he was wearing, with jeans and a button-up collared blue shirt, hid some of the truly impressive muscles that the t-shirt she was used to seeing him in had revealed. Yeah, and maybe not. Michael? Her heart shivered at the question, which she didn't repeat out loud. Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had posited that there were 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. A little more than 2 weeks after Michael had disappeared, 17 days to be precise, Charlie reckoned that she'd just been torpedoed right into the 3rd stage, because what kept running through her head was a feverish, "Please, God, I'll do anything, please." She stood in the small, grassy graveyard with the crude white cross that marked Michael's grave in front of her, and the viburnum hedge from which he had once gathered an armful of flowers to mark it to her left. As the steepled old First Baptist church loomed in the background, Charlie desperately clung to a sliver of hope. Please let it be him. The heavy silver man's watch that hung loosely around her left wrist, Michael's watch, several sizes too large for her arm, glinted in the golden autumn sun. She didn't know if that was a good sign or a bad one. Vacillating between joy and fear, she looked at the man frowning down at her with an intensity born of marrow-deep need. Except for those few small differences, it was all there. The square jaw, the broad cheekbones and forehead, the straight nose and beautifully cut mouth. The tawny hair, the height, the outrageous good looks. Her hand was on his arm. She could feel the solid muscles through the smooth leather of his jacket. Yet her eyes probed his, and she came up empty. There was no electric zing. No trumpets signaling a joyous reunion going off in her head. The vibration she was picking up with every atom of sensitivity she possessed translated to, "This is a stranger." Reality hit, and the fragile little bit of hope she'd been cherishing shattered like glass. "Face it," she told herself savagely as her hand dropped away from his arm. This gorgeous man is not Michael. He might be turning her inside out simply by standing there, but that was because of what was going on with her rather than anything to do with him. The multicolored pinwheels of happiness, of answered prayers, of unlikely miracles that had begun twirling through her bloodstream from the moment she had set eyes on this man, faded and stilled. It's not Michael, she told herself again, and the world once more became the gray, colorless place that his absence from her life had made it. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy. Her throat was so tight it hurt to talk. "Rick Hughes." The way his eyes narrowed on her face with speculation, the way the tan skin around them tightened and crinkled, made her stomach twist. The expression was all Michael. even if the brisk syllables with their total lack of a slow southern drawl were not. "And you are?" Okay. He apparently didn't know her, didn't recognize her. Pain curled through her system. She introduced herself, still in that same strangled voice. Charlie Stone. Still in shock from encountering the living image of the dead man she had only lately been able to admit even to herself that she loved, standing beside the grave where his body was interred. Despite everything her senses were telling her, she continued to search the man's face, his eyes, for some hint of Michael, some sign that it was him after all. She forced herself to stop, to get a grip. Michael's gone. She knew that, but she was obviously having trouble coming to terms with it. Rick Hughes's surprised expression was so much like Michael's that it was the equivalent of an arrow that lodged directly in her heart. Charlie Stone? Dr. Charlotte Stone? His gaze moved over her. Watching his face, she was able to follow along. She had chestnut brown hair, a little longer than shoulder length, that today was pulled back into a low ponytail. Delicate features, fair complexion, denim blue eyes. 5'6" and slender. Actually, more slender than usual, because since Michael had disappeared, she'd barely been eating. Once, Michael had told her men expected someone with her credentials to be butt ugly instead of the babe he'd labeled her. Remembering this, she interpreted Hughes's expression accurately, or at least she was pretty sure it was accurately. Her spine stiffened in response to the sheer sexism of men who automatically assumed that an educated woman would be unattractive. "Yes," she replied. And yes, okay, there was possibly a frosty overtone to her answer. "I was just up at Wallen's Ridge," he said, referring to the Supermax prison where Charlie, a psychiatrist, was currently conducting research on a government grant, studying the psychology of serial killers. It was also the place where, a little more than 8 weeks ago now, Michael had been murdered. "And I was told that you're the person I need to see. I was also told that you wouldn't be available for several more days, as you'd taken a temporary leave of absence." "Yes, I did." "To assist an FBI team in catching a serial killer." Less than an hour before, on this late Thursday afternoon in early October, she'd arrived back at Lonesome Pine Airport with plans to take the weekend to get her head on straight before returning to work at the prison on Monday. She'd been 5 minutes away from her house in Big Stone Gap when, from the back seat of the taxi that was currently waiting by the curb, she had spotted his stunningly familiar figure in the graveyard. Only, of course, in the way things tended to work in her life, it turned out that he was the wrong man. The tiny part of her brain that wasn't still reeling from shock scoffed. "You didn't really think that he was Michael standing there alive, did you?" But from the crushing sense of loss she was experiencing, it seemed that somewhere deep in her heart or soul, she had. "You can't be gone. Not just like that." She sent the thought winging directly toward Michael, one of dozens that had taken that route since he'd disappeared, and immediately shut that folly down. Even if, somewhere in the misty reaches of the universe, he by some miracle did still exist, and she knew she shouldn't even begin to allow herself to hope for that, mental telepathy had never been part of their thing. And yes, sometimes bad things happened just like that. Bad things like Michael being destroyed. Taking a deep breath, Charlie tried to focus.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?